So it's 9:21 a.m. April 5th, 2020, Sunday. I thought I'll make another extemporaneous podcast on random topic, and I just got my haiku moment thinking of Indrajal. When I was young, one of my treasured memories are those of comics. Indrajal comics in Bengali came from Calcutta, I guess, Kolkata. Indrajal, and they had Mandrake and Phantom. For those of you who don't know, Phantom is also big in Sweden, and it was also big in the because Phantom translated in Sweden was Phantomen in Swedish. So when I was doing eBay research, I mean not researching, looking for Phantom comics, there's this some guy in Sweden who actually has all the collection of Phantom, and so there were these two superheroes, Phantom and Mandrake, created by Lee Fox and some other guy, and it was in Bengali, and that was of course, Bengali is my mother tongue, and but I stopped my formal education in Bengali in Bangla in after grade 6. So that was the end of my formal education. So but still I retained all my Bengali knowledge the because I was a voracious reader. I read everything I could find my eyes and hands on in Bengali, like children literature at that time. And it did not stay when I after I grew up, so to speak. I mean, things like, yeah, there were this sudden phase of reading Humayun Ahmed and Misir Ali, but other than that, like Himu, other than that, I never really practiced. In Bengali, we call it Chorcha, the language. But I don't want this to be a hybrid podcast. My point being, so that was one of my first introduction to Bengali literature. Actually, yes, it was Bengali literature because that is a form of literature. The comics, there was Chatra Babu, Gopal Bhar, and Hada Bhoda, and Ante Fonte, and there was the Bengali Phantom, and on that it was on the comics uh, the candy like comics with that which appeared to be, and it wasn't glossy, but it was paper cover, but it's still like it's kind of like a darshan of a statue, puja statue. You see all of a sudden it's like so vivid, and it's because I mean, I'm sure the dopamine must be surging when I used to get my hands on it, like it's like gold nuggets. And Indrajal comics, it is to say there in Bengali. Probably they even had English versions. But the point I'm trying to say is Indrajal basically is Indra's net. The Vedic or the Hindu concept Upanishad, I don't know where it exactly mentions, Indra's net. And, spoilers alert, I think mathematicians should actually focus and devote all their time on this concept, because the concept is basically it's a net, and each consisting of nodes, which are each pearls, and each pearls reflects the entire. Each pearl contains the reflection of the other pearl, and the entire. Basically, each pearl reflects the entire network, and yeah. So I mean, it's kind of like, think of like a glass ball, and you attach another glass ball like a Buckminster Fuller type of sort of those Legos of chemical bonds, those balls. Imagine you construct this artificial net in your head. It's a nexus, and the nodes are of mirrors, and they reflect each other, and they reflect the entire network. Basically the concept of microcosm in macrocosm and macrocosm in microcosm. David Bohm, Carl Pribram, I have to look him up, it's been a while, and David Talbot, the guy who wrote the holographic universe. This is a fascinating concept because it's almost like a hologram. We live in a holographic universe where if you cut a reality, and that reality will somehow recreate like salamander, just like brain somehow. I'm sure there are some obscure neurosurgeon, like neurosurgery stories about, you people lose almost most of their brain, but you take certain cells, and that like fractal that somehow retains the entire information of the entire memories, and they can, and it generates, because I mean with gradual inch meal practice of, I guess, way, I mean therapy, and for Alzheimer or whatever. But I'm sure there is I must have read some story like that where you could create, you take this, segment, and from there onwards you can create this entire, the whole, reconstruct the whole piece like a hologram, like a salamander. You can recreate the entire scene from a fractal, like a Koch carve or Koch carve, Hilbert carve, or Menger sponge. These are all examples of it. Or even if you're tripping on acid and you see fractals, and each you magnify on it, the coast of England, and then you magnify on that, and you just, because what is the length of the coast of England, right? It's a fractal problem. It's like half something, like I forget, it's been a while. So Indra's net, now imagine you take that on face value. That's a basic assumption. Yeah, Indra's net exists, and that's as complex as it can get. And what would be the mathematical model of Indra's net? So basically you have to take a concept of set, or like a node. The node will be a set, empty set, or let's define aleph null as the one node that contains a reflection of all other nodes, which is infinity. And somehow it's a, I don't know, I mean intuitively I feel the hypergame is involved in it, hypergame paradox, where you play a hyper game with two, like infinite game with two players, like Ohrenfrot, Fraze games. It's about, and that's how the axioms of determinacy and axioms are created. The frailing symmetry, like the dart throwing. I'm rambling right now, but so yeah, the hypernode, like it's paradoxical. Basically, you take the paradox as a foundation, like Ouroboros and Russell said paradox. Like, okay, this statement, like if you were to say this statement is true, obviously can't build a foundation on that, because that is itself is a contradiction, because that statement is false. So why didn't you let the paradox itself, the catch-20 itself, be the foundation? It's kind of like a vortex that sucks everything up, and from there on you create an illusion of Indra's tower, seamless Indra's tower. See what I did there? And although there's an inherent danger that the Tower of Babel might just get sucked through that vortex, because like a singularity. So Indra's nest, so assuming that is the basic foundation of reality, the fabric of space-time, cosmos, Kaluza-Klein, the whole model and everything, that we're constructing, it's like the inherently the reality is like a grid-like existence, like matrix-like but grid-like, and it stretches to infinite direction, omnidirection, like these entire nodes. And so if a shaman were to get an insight from it on psychedelics, ayahuasca and whatnot, they can essentially do magic, because once you can exploit that foundation, and if you go to the Jesus level, and these are all rambling and could be considered quote unquote pseudoscience, fantasy, imagination, like pipe dream and whatnot, fair enough. But what I'm suggesting is an invitation to consider, the entertain the idea that it could at least be a possibility, and that possibility enables the magical, I mean, so of course hand waving, but then to the skeptics I'll say, okay, fine, hand waving. So how do you make an exact connection in your logical, whatever logical frame of mind and mathematical proof you're gonna give to your rebuttal? Obviously, any rebuttal you're gonna give, that's gonna be foundational language, which is underlying underpinning foundation would be logic, I suppose. And if your logic, you assume that it has a firm, strict, like a solid foundation, that's a pipe dream too. Because what's the binding glue that you holds your logic, your modus ponens, your modus tollendo, all this together? You can't define an implication operator, you fucking moron. That's the problem with skeptics. They don't take their theory too far. Just like Alan Watts would say, people with problem with all these philosophers is that they pretend, and if they could get away with it wearing a white coat, they pretend they're philosophers and logicians, but they don't in real life. They don't. When they think, it's not like as if they're thinking in terms of symbolic logic and strings and concatenation of syntax and all the bullshit operators are not like formal logic, Chomsky hierarchy. No one thinks like that. You cannot prove anything in terms of that after inventing it a posteriori. So that's my rant against the skeptics, who is always like a, who's always, they're the buzzkills of life. They're the hecklers. You perform something and they'll be the heckle. They're the Neil deGrasse Tyson of the world, or Michael Shermer. But Michael Shermer sounds like a nice gentleman. But still, his ideas are toxic, and there's this condescending, this subtonation and intonation that somehow skeptic is somehow deemed as a superior of intellectualism and whatnot, and that just irks me. That somehow we even like patronize humanities as soft science and arts as, oh, he's an arts major, as if science is somehow superior. And wasn't it Einstein who said that art without science is lame, religion? No, it was religion without science is lame. Science without religion is, you get, no, it's blind, something like that. But the point being, to be truly balanced, whole, harmonious, you gotta balance both your intuitive, holistic mind and the logical, rigorous mind, and that's when the harmony begins. So, if you before I got sidetracked and digressed, in the winding, meandering oxbow of my rant, that if you were to entertain the possibility, yes, who knows, maybe this whole reality is like, and you do get the insight on salvia or something, even though it's a shitty, trippy experience, if the reality was made of, constructed of Indra's net, then by theory, if you are to, even though we cannot prove it by chopping it up, and the reason we can chop energy up, because it's just, you can't destroy or create energy. So if energy was thus our foundational, substance, and then there was this, and I think there is some underlying theory, and Indra's net is just an abstract Platonic ideal of what the underlying theory is of non-existence, quote unquote, or in capital letters, non-existence. The soul, the sort of the form, the thing, that the whole that wheels the potter's wheel together, or a carriage wheel together, that sort of invisible form, the nihilistic ex nihilo Buddhist, like, form is emptiness, emptiness form, that form, emptiness, and that sort of, that electromagnetic field somehow generates this Indra's nest, and in that Indra's net, this sort of gravitational force field, and they reflect the entire cosmos. And if you could somehow were to hack it, not literally, but to break through the encoding of it somehow, and probably the only way not only way, some ways it happens as seen from obviously arbitrary evidence, like in a fictional, especially like powder. Why is it that in every movies you begin like powder phenomenon, they reach this intellectual limit and then they traverse that to this psychic realm, like in phenomenon and powder, or even Kyle XY, and like almost like there is this pattern of how to be a Jesus, and like saints and Babas and Sai Baba and Shadhu Baba, like, but then there's fake Shadhu Babas too, like, but I'm talking about, you reach this after an alchemy of mind, you reach this state where the more you peel away the layers of ego, the rigor and logic, the artificial program, the brainwash, the artificial structure, after you dissolve that, the ego dissolution, you break through this entire force, this force of love, energy, and that could be negative energy or good energy or positive energy, this ball of light, invisible, this feeling. We're a vibration, that's where the New Age community will say we're a vibrational universe. So imagine this vibration field, and somehow this creates this universe, which is the underpinning, like an upholstery, literal upholstery of a cushion. It's kind of like a network, that nexus that holds together is like an Indra's net. And once, if you can do that, if you accept that as your first axiom, and every system has an axiom, any epistemological, foundational, like even in axiology, ethics, whatever it might be, any system has a foundation on axiom, which are basically nothing but fucking beliefs. you fucking moron. Even atheism is a belief. Yeah. How can you prove? You cannot prove. They say, okay, the onus is on the extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. The onus is on the people, and the burden of proof is on the claimant. But why? I can claim whatever I want. Why do you consider that as written stone on Moses code? See, everyone has beliefs. People don't just want to accept it, and even me, like, well, obviously I do. Like, we have all have our blind spot because so that's why I especially try to have this Wu Wei, spontaneous, Bruce Lee. No technique is the best technique. This emptiness as the form as the highest technique of no virtue. Highest virtue is no virtue. Like sort of not even situational ethics. Like no belief, like no, what I mean by no belief is like not even that. It's like fuck it, that kind of mentality, meh mentality. And so as I was saying, so once you take that as your basic first axiom, you realize why people could do things like magic and cause break into this wild symmetry of quantum mechanics, thermodynamics, and whatnot, Feynman diagram, because that's why Jesus could probably, that could be the Hume's connection between the physics and the magical realm. If someone could like, but then how do you prove it? What's the bridge? I mean, speaking of bridge, there's this Einstein-Rosen bridge that says apparently we have this thing in our brain that takes portal to another dimension, and we are quick to dismiss. That's my bitter criticism of academia and formal education. Instead of having growth mentality, of acceptance and open-mindedness, these anal fucking rejects in life, these disillusioned, jaded people who probably got hurt somewhere, sometimes they're down when they were growing up as a child, which probably didn't want to admit it. So they create these barriers of and they quote unquote under the guise of science, and which is based on another ego trip that logic, rigor, precise. Alan Watts would call them the prickly people, the skeptics, this hard-nosed skeptics, and they even pride themselves on being this hardened skeptic. And notice the word hardened, as if they had developed this callus, this crust around their ego, where they somehow are so conditioned to believe that must be the way. So almost you take this emptiness, this ball of field, and you create a crust around it, and somehow you associate yourself with the crust. So that's the problem with too many. And again, healthy skepticism good, but when you take that to the extreme, you don't take that to the extreme. You should actually take it all the way to the extreme, like Pyrrhonist. I used to do ceramics, and my professor once said, I used to, like, when I mold, it's very rough and raw and, like, and he said, why do you try to smoothen it up to make it all polished and nice? I mean, why don't you go all the way? If you want to do something, might as well do it all the way. And then you reach an impasse and stalemate and cul-de-sac where you realize that the only way you can resolve that paradox, the catch-22, is by breakthrough, would be transcendence. I mean, just like any system or in theory or in feedback loop or any mechanism, only way you can transcend it is to be on another dimension. You cannot be a toaster and understand yourself. So you have to be on different vantage point. So maybe this reality, the Uber reality or the Ur reality, you are Babylon Ur, but that's probably different Ur than this Ur element. The primordial reality is probably holding this, encapsulating this, and this real, and these are all theories, fine. So as I was saying, skeptics don't know and that's why the demise of academia and peer review research papers, because they're out there pompously trying to promote their own ideas. They're blind to entertain other ideas, but that wasn't the spirit of science originally, and that's why you have all this vilification, demonization of Rupert Sheldrake and other pseudoscientists like others people as pseudoscientists like Bruce Lipton and well-meaning Greg Baden, and who are obviously like who obviously retain their childlike imagination and curiosity and this open-mindedness that we should all possess and harbor, like a calligraphy skill of a samurai and a ikebana. Like people, they cultivated both the arts and training and discipline. So if you now, having ranted on it for 20 minutes just to create that as the basic premise, that Indra's net, then obviously, yeah, when I say obviously, it's not even hand waving. It's as obvious to me as a ghost would be for it to say present in front of me and any apparition. And that reminds me of Ezra's Pound, apparition of faces. But I think probably my gears are getting. This is where I'm revving up. So once that is the foundation, then you do can the miracles, the magic that has a justification at least. Yeah, I mean, if you assume by interestness that reality infinite is when the infinite, or the macrocosm is the microcosm, then obviously, then it's as if you are a logician, then it's as obvious to you. Then it's obvious to you why magic is possible, because you're literally extracting millions out of, I mean, infinite out of infinite, and that even mathematically, there are this infinite ordinal arithmetic and but Takiyetu diagram and like those things, but that's a different domain. But so people will say, oh, why is it obvious? How do you prove it? Well, how do you prove A if A implies B? If A, then A implies B. Modus ponens, yeah, because how is that any obvious to you? Just because someone took some symbols and just note discreetly wrote down as if some abstract like imagery, like this abstract thought, and just because there's this all precise and polished and has this formal feeling, doesn't mean actually it's logical and it holds water, it's any airtight than any random fluky imagination of some foo rara of some new age guru, right? Everyone is blind to their own skepticism. Or but then you do reach that realm where magic is the de facto, is is it, like, and even the psychiatrists, these pretentious psychiatrists, will be quick to demonize you as being schizophrenic if you do, like, yeah, if you take it overboard. But then again, what is overboard? Who knows? Maybe magic, synchronicity, Mazatec shamans, magicians, the healers, traditional healers, and they want to do this. Oh, well, and the thing is, when they do are validated, like the Tumo yoga or other, even the Harvard, I guess, the research where they try to lower the crime rate with meditation, and when they do, or the the Japanese the water crystal experiment, that gentleman, the scientist, Hakuri, I don't know, Matsumo, I don't know his name, but I am aware of his ideas, or the plants of consciousness. See, soon it will be accepted. Like, first they're rejected, but even though like hypnosis, or like, I mean, you'll be hard pressed to find any serious Olympic athlete who doesn't use any form of visual imagery or meditation, which have been proven by science. But why is it that unless it's proven by science, somehow it's like not fucking real or something? And again, science is so limited and like on their own four wall of background and framework, and we take that as sort of this be all end all, ultima thule ne plus ultra, this limit, as if this litmus of measurement and everything, which is disgusting actually, because it's just nothing but pretentious academic this, and once people they are the priests sort of the society, the gatekeepers, the people with degrees, like they think they've reached that limit of expertise, even though the difference between the cultivation expertise of Japanese arts, like they call it the way of the flower, the way of the tea, is because it's an internal alchemy. It's a cultivation of self-cultivation. But with academia, there are the rare few ones. When you when you reach PhD, you reach a level of black belt, right? But when you're doing martial arts, and you can get one of those people in martial arts who have reached black belt, but they haven't done the internal alchemy, like, and Aikido is all about internal alchemy, spiritual, and that's the essence of it. That's all these meatheads like Joe Rogan and probably his buddy Joko Willing will probably miss, because I mean, hey, if I have a baby, if I have my mother, if I have my father, if I have my grandfather, if I have my mother, I don't give a fuck how much of a thuggy Navy SEAL you're. I'm gonna fuck you up. But if you read that in my mind, like the Tea Master Ronin story, the famous Master ceremony story, if you can read that in that expression in someone's face, you're not gonna fuck with him. And that's the essence of Aikido, which all this stupid UFC chest beating, Conor McGregor ass kissing, fucking all this this adrenal feeling fucking virulent tweens fail to realize is because and America has a lot to promote this. It's all about monster truck and mighty, this fucking towering like 8-storied fucking Roth, or what I mean by those Roth, those juggernaut Indian Roth like trucks. It has this, the bigger is better mentality, but like you bigger, the more bigger you are, the more you're like the louder guy gets is the one who gets like shut down in the room. And we have this again. Then people will say, oh, because you're not. Yeah, maybe no one wants to like be this flamboyant, this center of life of the party guy, like thing. Maybe maybe the subtle highest level of mastery is probably the gray man, who's like more invisible, obscure. Just be a fucking driving a fucking souped up car and careening 80 miles an hour in your school zone doesn't make you a badass. If you follow the rule, that actually probably, and if you can follow it to the letter, that you might think that's passive, but that when your ass get busted by the cops and you're fucking soon you lose everything, you get car get impounded and whatnot, who look like the fucking clown then. But in another, to balance it out, this American quality of individualism, self-expression, I value that. This everyone is a sort of the master of the domain, and you know how Jesus says the kingdom of heart is within you, heaven is within your heart, or like almost that's also another, like imagine Indra's net. What if we all are creating a reality, creating a reality, like we are each are our, like we are our nodes, and we're like exhibiting this consciousness, and we're in our cosmic conscious bubble, so to speak. Each we have this own sphere, and we're, you know, communicating, mingling, and like signaling, and like back and forth, to and fro, like just like planets, like, or like, you know, we're like each are like our own center of force, like stars, like with the gravitational force field, where we're of energy and love, and we are soul and spiritual being, and we're this cluster of energy and ball of energy, and we're creating the just like the bad of the brain in the vat, in the brain in the vat, in the brain in the vat thing. Like, even though the reality I'm perceiving right now is actually encoded in my own reality, like kind of like those not the Necker cubes, like hypercube, actually cube within a cube, the fourth dimensional concept, which we cannot actually, we can intuit, but we can express in our language, the limits of our language. And some people who has the psychedelic experience, they often go to that, they transcend that dimension and reach that level where anything is possible and everything is possible. And that's what ultimately Ravana, those Indian gods with 10 masks, 10 heads, that's like sort of the essence that they want to convey. Like there's this dimension where simultaneously all realities coexist at the same time. And even though I haven't done any psychedelics like DMT or LSD, but on salvia for 10 minutes, and that 10 minutes, that's the worst trip of my life. And see, even though it was the worst trip of my life and I didn't break through, I still captured that essence like 10 years ago, and it still carried with me, because that was so powerful. And that's when I ex cathedra, I felt God's presence within me. This as if I felt this, I am this energy, and it's gonna sort of, I'm a genie in a bottle, and the bottle is gonna explode and I'll just come out of it, and it scared me. But that is so I kind of took it actually to, speaking of bashing science, that was actually my scientific in the flesh proof that yeah, maybe something supernatural, preternatural, or extraordinary extranatural realms do exist, forces do exist. Like we're not the only, this is not it. I mean, it cannot be it, logically it cannot be it, like, because there has to be because I mean it just can't. Just like the vicious cycle paradox, like we're the you know, you take a dictionary, try to, like, we're in the dictionary of life, and who wrote the dictionary, who authored the, and then again that presupposes the idea that why should there be an author, but that also presupposes the idea of the idea that why should there be an author, questioning the presupposition of the idea of why should there be an author. It's like infinite regrets. Where do you stop? Anyone's, it's like basically like fucking coin toss. And just like there are no axioms in the universe, there are laws that, but again, those laws are not to the dot, like even pi 3.14159265358978238795105820974105820974945923078164062862. You get the idea. So I just rattled out, I think, 60 digits of pi, or probably, I didn't want to do 100 just to create the doubt. Probably I don't know that. Yeah, actually, it's kind of rusty, but I didn't want to mess it up because I have this. I want it to be pristine, and probably although once I rattled out, they're all letter perfect, I guess. So even pi to 1,000 billion, where does it, like? I mean, it trails off to infinity, right? So yeah, even pi, like we didn't even know the real, like the unknown, like this unknown theory, uncertainty. We didn't even know we cannot know the all the values of the pi. And of course, there's the problem with that is the way we define it and the way we do our mathematics, and you know, maybe we have to transcend this realm. We go to the Akashic records, or this we gain this omniscience, like the NDE or DMT. We gain this omniscience, where we know everything about everything in an eye blink, in a kalpa, in a kalpic second, because maybe that is our real act, like essence, this kernel of our being, that yeah, we have infinite possibilities, probabilities inside our space, at least inside ourselves, within. And there are limitations, obvious limitations to mathematics, and like charge Turing thesis, like Gödel's, and Turing, and in physics Schrodinger. So how the hell do you know in life we don't, in general, like if everything in reality, this philosophical perception, there is no, that some things will always forever be remain unknown unless we transcend this realm somehow. And so, and the moment we say unless we transcend it, that's when we go the bridge, that bridge, the leap of faith from suspension of belief, from reason to imagination, the reason faith continuum, as I like to pompously tout and promote. So that I want to see everyone in McDonald's and Wendy's and fucking Starbucks and dispensary, like talking about fucking reason faith continuum, like, or yeah, because it is a continuum. We try to make this rigorous distinction, cut and dry, like delineation between reason and faith, but in essence, it's a continuum. So if magic is possible, and shamans, Mazatec shamans, or Native American shamans, they can channel, they can just go to that where logic breaks down upon ingestion of some substance, and you become more intuitive, oceanic feeling, like, with the universe. And the thing is, since more people are either through yoga, meditation, new age, right brain, art therapy, drama therapy, whatever, and that's an access, this bridge to that another sort of dimension and the realm, and this next level, so to speak, where we realize the ultimate futility of the dimension, the framework, or scaffolding of logic and analysis and mathematics and philosophy and whatnot. And that's when the poet remains. Move, because you have to. And even though I'm blabbering, but that's when the ego dies down, when the ego comes to, it surrenders, it realizes the ego has this, and ego is this more identified with this Western analytical train of thought, school of thought, because, and that's when ego realizes, and that's the ultimate meaning of surrender. Surrender has nothing to do with, yeah, and that's what ego is. Like, ego doesn't want to surrender because it's egoistical, but ego, by virtue ipso fact, like res ipsa, ego has to be egoistical, and the only way it can be non-ego is be by non-ego. And most people don't want to be non-ego out of ego. And when you see that paradox, this catch-22, that maze, Golokdha, the circular maze, this trap of life, the only way to cut through that Gordian knot would be to take a sword and cut through it, and the only you can do it is to just completely just go, you know, the Zen master would go or hit you with a stick, and that's when the thought stops and you experience. And when you do reach that level of probability space of infinite possibilities, when the ego thought dies down, that's when synchronicities begin. Jungian synchronicities or magic and supernatural. And lest psychiatrists deem you crazy, the only way, the reason they do it is because they're in the lower plane. So lower by, I don't mean in a, well, it could be theoretical lower because it's all trapped in ego and academia and formal bullshit that they have regurgitated, because that in essence, and they have to be that way. Alan Watts would say the far out people are those probably, who knows, not the hippies, probably the ones who are doing the 9 to 5 job in suits in Wall Street. Who knows who are the real far out people are, playing this game of pretending that we are not who we think we are. But even though, and again, reality is true, veridical in each existence. If I'm feeling skeptical, that's true in my skeptical plane of existence. If I'm feeling airy, fairy, woo-wee, mystical, that's true in that plane of existence. That's true. And in this, all this sort of, imagine this plane of existence all stacked on top of each other. Yeah, we have this directional of up and down and high and low and, you know, right and left, lateral, longitudinal, crosswise and whatnot. But they're probably like, there is no hierarchy outside this space-time realm, like outside this universe, outside Planck's length, Planck's dimension, whatnot. And membranes, the multiverse, those are interesting concepts of universe. Maybe universe is not how we tend to perceive. Maybe the real flat earthers are the ones who think the universe is just like as it is, instead of probably it could be just like a simulation, like a video game. So that's flat earth is just a farce. Cosmos is playing this big grand joke upon us, like a jester. Joe Rogan talked about jester. I wonder if he's aware of Alan Watts' concept of Joker, or like how that article that cosmic and you know, enlightenment is just a cosmic joke, and that's why he saw those gestures. Not only he's a comedian, but the fact that, or other people who probably might see gestures, is because ultimately the universe is trapping us and is playing this grand big joke upon us. And I hate to be the butt of that joke and the brunt of that joke, but ultimately, and that's what God is doing, to setting himself up for failure probably some in many ways, if not when he's being ambitious and riding the wave, is because he's trapping himself, just like Yogananda say, God has no one to play with, so he breaks himself up and shatters himself up in infinite places to do that, and pretends that he is all these discrete parts, and the whole is probably not greater than the part, but the part is not greater even than the whole. But what I'm trying to say is the fact that if we're the essence of our being is divine, and we're really God, and God is the ultimate first axiom, then by virtue of the definition, it must hold true that if you're indeed really God, or what I mean by God is this ultimate energy, that the ultimate first axiom, the first cause, or the what that the atomic, the real atomic, this energy, gravitational force field is, where that cannot be broken down anything in any, this energy that cannot be subdivided any further into discrete patterns, is that when we reach that non-existent state where it is all the blind spot, I mean the cul-de-sac and the impasse and the stalemate, and this blind alley leading to this cul-de-sac, this dead end, we realize, and that is just, the dead end is actually our intellectual dead end, because we realize the folly and vanity and the limits of it. That's when we don't use logic and reason anymore. We do as we, and it may not, it's not as a whim, it's not even spontaneity, it's like the billows come down. The Taoists have the concept of billows. You come down, and when you're silent, it speaks. But even though it speaks, the spoken word is an expression of itself. So that's my sort of smorgasbord of ideas, this scattered smattering of ideas of how the what could be a possible connection between reason and logic, the bridge between this dimension and the magical dimension, mystical dimension, the skeptical dimension, and how we're all, and you cannot prove any of these. Maybe the only way you can experience this is by not having that the probing mind, proboscis like mind, to prove anything. And only way magic is possible is if you suspend your judgment, you're willing to be deceived. And that's when the cosmos, universe, essentially plays its game. When you give the ultimate gambit, the gambit of belief and judgment and suspension of belief and judgment. Thank you.